Welcome to another week of Real Personal Finance. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. I'm feeling a bit Eartha Kitt with this new microphone setup that I was mentioning.
Yes.
Makes my voice sound amazing.
Meg got a new microphone, so her voice is super velvety.
Yeah.
Today, we are going to talk about something that commonly we see in both of our practices,
Mhm.
especially focused with clients who have like stock compensation and cash bonuses and all these things. People usually arrive to us with some complexity, not knowing what to do. And they usually have something along the lines of this question: what should I do with this pile of cash?
Even though we won't be getting into a giant pile of stock today, I often see them show up with basically
Yes.
their investments in those two buckets. I've got a giant pile
Yes.
of company stock and a giant pile of cash that I got from selling even
Stock.
more company stock.
Yes.
Yes.
And we will touch on that in a future episode. For today, yeah, what should we do with that pile of cash? And it does seem that there's they're not sure what to do. Like they don't want to, you know, make a mistake. There's a little bit of paralysis here, right?
Mhm.
It's like, I'm just gonna build up this cash because I'm not really sure what to do with it, and I don't know what's going on. What are your thoughts
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, I definitely see that. The thinking is as long as I don't do anything with the cash, I can't make a mistake. Because as soon as I invest the cash or buy something with the cash, it's either gone or at risk of being lost.
Right.
So as long as I don't take that step, I haven't taken on a risk. And legitimate. I mean, that's a very rational way of thinking about things. It also ignores the risk of losing out on the opportunity of what that cash can do for you, right? Either yeah.
100% where my mind went as you were saying that. It's like it's so, it's like stuffing it under the mattress is kind of
Mhm.
like this is a safe place to be, because normally it is just sitting in cash. It's not even in like a high yield savings account, right? Like
Yeah.
earning like 4 or 5%. It's just sitting at the bank. And yeah, we're missing out on the opportunity of just keeping up with inflation, of
Mhm.
growing for our future, of really putting it to work in our life in places that impact us.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about from the perspective of the interest you can earn, that people seem to be very happy about the fact that you can earn 4 to 5% interest nowadays in the right
Mhm.
kind of account. That might even encourage people to leave it in cash even longer because, oh, hey, 2, 3 years ago I was getting 0% interest and now I can
Right.
get 5, and that seems really good, except when you compare it against, the US stock market going up by 20% in 2023.
Right. Which, like, most of our clients who are younger are looking to, make have financial freedom in the future. And
Mhm.
and having investment returns of 4 to 5% consistently isn't really going to help them. They need to have those big years
Yeah.
along with those down years so that they get that higher rate of return that's going to allow purchasing power to stay in front of them. And purchasing power is just a really fancy way of saying, like, what's the cost of a gallon of milk? And it's, a lot more now than it was 10 years ago.
Sure.
And you have to stay in front of that. And one of the best ways to do that's by investing.
Yeah, so I think the main obstacle to people doing something with their cash is their awareness that they don't have a
Hmm.
coherent plan for
Yeah.
their entire financial life. So any
Yeah.
decision they make is going to feel isolated, arbitrary, sort of in a vacuum, not in support of some bigger picture they have for how they want to build their life, how they want to manage their finances to build that life.
Agreed. Couldn't agree more. And the work that I know you do at your firm and that we do at our firm, what we're doing is you take a good amount of time to focus on what's essential for people to live a great life,
Mhm.
for them to live their great life. And I say their great life because everyone's version of what a great life looks like is slightly different. There's a lot of overlap, but they're
Mhm.
not the same, right?
Yeah, I
And
don't
then
know like, I don't know many people who want a wingback chair with an ottoman, but that is essential to my great life.
yes, exactly. And not that many people need surfboards, but I do,
Yeah.
right? So it's like it's all about what matters to them. And then once we understand what matters to them, we look at the resources they have and look at, like, well, where do you put this to work in your life to help you accelerate moving toward those goals, whatever those goals are.
Yeah, there's a well-known coach in our profession who, and I will paraphrase because I don't remember the exact saying, but it says something. She said something like, "When the vision is clear, the decisions are easy."
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
getting really spending time and effort on clarifying that vision makes the decisions, a lot of the decisions about money, way easier.
So, knowing what matters most to you when you have a pile of cash certainly helps look at
Mhm,
what to do.
mhm.
I think we can also give a frame of stuff you kind of have to do with your
Yep,
pile of cash, or make sure you've covered before you do anything else with it.
yep.
Stuff you ought to be looking at, and then stuff that we see people want to do that they're in many cases that they're funding with this pile of cash as well. Does that sound like a good frame?
It does. Sounds like an excellent framework.
Okay, cool. So why don't we start with stuff we have to do? And the only thing I think we have to do is die and pay taxes. So
I think someone once said that, didn't they? Yeah.
yes. so so I don't know about you, but the first thing I want to look at when someone has a pile of cash is I quickly want to look at like, well, when was this created and have
Mhm.
you already paid taxes? Because sometimes they might think this pile of cash is theirs when in fact a portion of it belongs to the federal government or their state government.
Yep. Right. Super common if you work in tech or have any other sort of job where there's a bunch of equity compensation. You've gone through an IPO, a bunch of stock just vested for you, and you sell it. You most likely still have a pretty big outstanding tax bill.
So, like, tax planning is something that we're going to want to look at pretty quickly to see, like, are you okay? Is this dollar amount really yours? And so long as it is, we're good. But if it's not, we just want to parse that off to the side
Right. That
and
cash is not, in fact, yours.
yes, and just kind of say, "Hey, this belongs to them. Let's just send it
Yeah.
over, and you're all good now. Now we know what you get to keep."
Yeah. I think that
Yeah.
was the only thing that you and I could think of that was under the have to do category.
Yes.
You get to
Yes.
choose everything else.
Then we go to things that stuff that we think you ought to do,
Hmm.
like things that are kind of like traditional foundational planning things that we would look to see, are you doing this yet? And if you're not, have a conversation with you about it.
Right. I mean, this is, to sort of put it glibly, this is the adulting part of personal finance.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not exciting, maybe it's not fun, but you recognize it as a requirement to be prudent and protect yourself now and protect your family in the future and all that sort of stuff.
Exactly. So it's things like, we'd want to look at your balance sheet, and just your balance sheet just as a reminder is looking at like, what do you own? What are your assets? And then the other question is, what do you owe? Like, do you have any loans out, and who do
Hmm.
you owe? And we want to look at what percentage rates do you owe people. And so, there's kind of plenty of people talk before about good debt, bad debt. Like
Hmm.
the thing that I think everyone will agree is probably good debt is like your long-term primary mortgage is
Hmm.
usually considered good debt. Could be on an investment property as well if it's cash flowing properly for you.
Hmm.
um, Beyond that, and then of course maybe a car loan or some student loans, but the
Hmm.
question becomes like, well, what interest rates are you paying on those things?
Yep.
Because if you're paying a high interest rate of, like right now you could be paying 7, 8, 9%, or credit cards you could be paying
Way
in the
higher.
teens.
Yeah.
um, Probably want to pay those down pretty quickly, because interest is one of those things where if you are the owner of something and you get to receive the interest, it's lovely. But if
Right.
you are,
Yay, money.
if you're the borrower, and especially the borrower at higher interest rates, it really cuts into your financial future.
Yeah, and I think that one of the questions is always, well, how high of an interest rate warrants paying it off? And it's not like there's calculus behind this where we can say, well, exactly 8.2% interest rate and above, you should pay it off. But certainly, one of the things I like to compare it to is, well, that is a guaranteed cost to you, whatever the interest rate is.
Yes.
8% interest rate means you're guaranteed to have to pay 8%. Is there any investment in the world that is a guaranteed 8% rate of return? Because if you invest the money instead of paying it off, that's what you're saying. You're betting you can get more than 8% in investment return. So that's a
Exactly.
sort of a mental rubric I use to figure out what interest rate above which I want to pay off debt instead of possibly invest the money.
Yeah, we're on a similar page there, and I think where it can go from ought to want to is
Mm.
some people also just have an aversion to debt.
Oh,
They
yeah.
just, for whatever there's the emotional side, not just the finance side, because the
Mhm.
finance side you described so lovely, right? Especially like if you have like the mortgage on our house, I think it's like 2.675 or something like
Mhm.
that. It's like we're never in a rush to pay that down
Yeah.
fast because we can just the opportunity cost of what we can do with that extra money, it just goes to other places. It makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense. But some people are just like, I can't stomach having any debt and I don't want to have any. Well,
Yep.
there's a freedom that comes from not having debt as well. So that could be something that they look to accelerate for that reason, but probably in the context of the overall plan and understanding what the trade off is by doing that.
Yeah. Right, so that paying off debt with this pile of cash sort of has a foot in both the ought to and want to
Totally.
world.
Yeah, but the want to is probably more so emotional if it's on the lower end of the interest rates.
Yeah.
On the higher end of the interest rates, it's probably like,
It's
yeah, it probably just
ought
makes
to.
sense to go pay that off so you don't have that on your plate anymore.
Yes, as
Um,
long as you have an emergency fund.
Totally, which is another ought to. Like, do
Mhm.
you have one? And we can do an episode on emergency funds again in the future just to get your own take on it. But
Mhm.
typically we want to look at things like, well, how likely are you to go from one job to the next without having a lot of time? Are you a single earner in the family or are there
Mhm.
two earners in the family? If there are two earners in the family, do you earn 80% or 50%? Right.
Right.
So like there's so many factors that go into how much cash do you want to leave as cash to make sure you guys feel safe. But yeah, do you have one and is it full? Those are the two main questions
Right.
to look at there.
Yeah, and I think again talking about the ought to versus want to, there's some minimum amount of emergency fund which is an ought to. And we can
Hmm.
quibble about how much that is, 3, 6 months depending on your personal circumstances. But I know a lot of people go beyond the ought to into the want to. I want an
Hmm.
entire year of sort of
Hmm.
unreduced personal expenses because I sleep better at night.
Yeah, we have I know a few clients who are that way. And then there's others who are just like, they could literally have like zero and they would be totally fine.
Yeah.
Um,
Those
and
clients
I'm
make
and
me
I'm like,
nervous.
no, 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 let's have something. Let's just,
Yes.
just,
Yeah.
just like 2 months. Okay.
Yeah.
Like just know that there's some cash there in case, so I can sleep at night for you too.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally. I think another thing that could go in ought to would be, and it's pretty rare, I think, for most of our clients, but it is something that we'll run into every now and again, is just retirement savings. And
Mhm.
like, are you doing flipping the proper switches in your retirement savings? Because usually that cash is coming from bonuses or stock comp that they're selling. And it's just looking at like, are we optimizing cash flow and retirement savings for taxes as well as for retirement?
Most of our clients, I would say, even if we take away this cash, they're already on a really good path towards having enough money to retire,
Yeah.
which you could call financial independence,
Hmm.
right? So any extra pile o cash that you're dealing with, if you're outside of that cash already doing well, you have, already started saving for retirement, you have a good savings rate for retirement each year, there's, in my opinion, not probably not an ought to in the retirement savings. That's more of a I want to accelerate. I want to get to that point of financial independence faster. That
Hmm.
feeling of I can take or leave any job I want. But for those clients who, for whatever reason, they were in graduate school until they're 48 years old, or um, just had to support family, or for whatever reason they haven't done much retirement savings, if you have a pile of cash, I think that falls more into the ought to bucket now, that you
Agreed.
really need to be shoveling that into your retirement portfolio
Yeah.
in some manner. There are sort of a few ways you can get it into accounts for retirement. Um,
Hmm.
but if you're sort of behind on retirement, then that's an ought to.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where we just look at it and go like, what could you be doing here? Do you need to increase this? And then do you, as you're saying, do you want to
Yeah.
increase this? Yeah, and I think that kind of moves us pretty nicely into the stuff that you want to do
Mhm.
framework.
Yes. Yes, once
And
you feel like an adult and you've done all the boring smart stuff.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that a lot of people do want to do is work toward financial independence, or
Mhm.
I just describe it as making work optional. Like you get to decide to go to work. Um,
Yeah,
and I think a lot of people there, when you look at that, that's when you go back to looking at, in a sense, retirement accounts, but you're also looking at the tax location of accounts. And tax location is not something that we talk about too much um,
yeah,
at large, but it's essentially asking the question of like, hey, what do we have that's like that pre-tax money in like the 401ks and the IRAs, and like how much do we have that's like post-tax money in the Roths IRAs and Roth 401ks, and then what do we have that's just taxable investments, and how does our accounts overall line up? Because the more we have in each of them, like if we could ideally have 33% in each of them, it makes the functionality for retiring in the future with whatever tax changes get thrown at us a lot more nimble than if we just put everything in a 401k and
right,
now
a
we're
pre-tax
just gonna,
401k especially.
yeah,
Yeah.
now we're just kind of stuck having a, we have that paycheck for the rest of our lives, but whatever the future tax rates that they set on us, we just have to deal with it.
Mhm.
So I think that's one of the things where we can look at it with the big pile of cash is what do we do with this and why?
Yeah. W One of the things that I find clients tend to, sort of unconsciously assume is that the only accounts that are quote unquote for retirement are the official legal retirement accounts.
Right.
401ks, IRAs
Yeah.
primarily, other accounts if you're in public sectors, that sort of thing. Um, and they don't, at least at first, understand that you can use a taxable account, just a plain old taxable account, maybe that you even have at Robinhood, um,
Yep.
for any goal, including retirement. So I'll often actually draw a picture. It's just like a box or a circle, and it says, "This is your retirement portfolio."
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll draw smaller boxes inside of it for, and these are all of the accounts that are
Mm-hmm.
in your retirement portfolio:
Mm-hmm.
401k, Roth IRA, traditional IRA, HSA, and a taxable account.
Right.
It's not an official retirement account by sort of the IRS's standards, but its purpose is to serve retirement. So
100%.
in this case, a
Yeah.
giant pile of cash, you could, yeah, definitely accelerate your um, retirement savings just by putting it in a taxable account, which you have mentally labeled retirement.
Retirement. Yeah, and just to be like, as I don't want to go too in depth on this, but like one of the things that we look at often when people retire, especially if you can make work optional earlier in your life, is you're going
Mhm,
to go from having big income years to like no income years.
mhm,
And in those no income years or low income years, because you're maybe taking from a taxable portfolio in that time, that's a time when like Roth conversions can make a lot of sense. In these, basically, that just means take some of the pre tax money and put it into a Roth
mhm.
account, but you need to have taxable money available to pay for it.
Yeah,
So it's lovely if you have the three buckets available for
yeah.
optimizing taxes, right?
Taxable money is the Swiss Army knife. Use it for anything,
It is.
anytime, no penalties.
It is. It's so good. So good.
Yeah.
Totally agree. You kind of alluded to it earlier about people having an emergency fund for a year, but I think
Mhm.
that also kind of alludes to the idea of, hey, I just want to set this money aside so that I can take like my sabbatical.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I have this I can take a year off and I don't have to worry about working, right?
Right. I mean, we both work with a lot of people in tech, and I don't know if a lot of your clients have this feeling, but mine do of, "Oh my god, I need a break."
Mhm.
It's either sort of a classic toxic work environment or just, "It's been so much for so long. I need a break. I can't even think about what else I wanna do until I get out of this job."
Yeah.
Then you get this sort of giant pile of cash, and you can say, "Hey, look, there's your sabbatical staring you in the face right there.
You want to take a year off? Here you go.
Here you go." Yeah.
It's okay. You can do it.
Yep.
No, I totally agree with that. Other things that we'll see clients want to fund with the pile of cash is
Mhm.
it's like, hey, like just living life with salaries and living life with kids. Sometimes college funding doesn't get the top
Mhm.
priority, so it's something that clearly comes into the picture here, where they just go like, well, what can we put toward college to make sure the kids are okay?
Yeah, and again, it's all coming back to what excites the client? What excites you, the person with a giant pile of cash after you've taken care
Mhm.
of all the need to, ought tos? Does it really get rev your engine to think my kid's entire college account could be fully funded with this, and then I never have to worry about it again. It's just done. And I have definitely seen that with clients who otherwise want to hang on to money or to company stock. I'm like, all right, can we just take enough out of this to fully fund your kid's college? And that lights up their eyes in a way that nothing else does.
They're like, yes, please.
Yes, please.
I don't
Yeah.
have to worry anymore. And another thing that we'll see, especially for younger clients, is they'll utilize these funds. This is a great way to save for like a down payment on a home.
One thing I would used to say about company stock is that it was my favorite kind of alchemy, turning company stock into your home, into a home for yourself. Yeah. And cash too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's the frame, right? So the frame is really like you have this pile of cash. What are you going to do with it? Maybe you're not moving on it. What do you have to do? Do you have any taxes you owe?
Mhm.
What ought you do? The adulting.
Mhm.
Do you have liabilities you can pay down? Do you have your emergency fund? And then, are you really saving comfortably for retirement? Probably are. And then the stuff you want to do. Do you want to accelerate retirement? Do you want to save for the next house? What's going to light you up? What do
Yeah.
you want to do?
And I find that, especially with the clients who come to me, and I don't know if it's because I'm a woman, so I attract more female clients, and women in general tend to be more risk averse, but they really love the idea of taking care of the need tos and ought tos and managing all those risks. And then they know the risks are managed, and then they can actually enjoy
Yeah.
spending the money on what they want to.
Yeah. Such a good frame. Love this frame. All right. Well, until next time, we'll see you guys. Bye, Meg.
Thanks, Scott.